Oregon fans, what's going on? How we doing? Hope everybody's having an awesome day. It is Wednesday, January 11th, 2023. This is our first show of the new year. Apologies for the delay in getting the podcast going. I mentioned it in the latest edition of the Ducks Digest newsletter, but been having a couple of technical issues here and there with regard to the audio of the podcast transferring over to my editing software. So I'm going to troubleshoot that and try to get that all shored up so that you guys can listen to the Ducks Dish podcast wherever you are. You know, some people like to listen to it at the gym. Some people like to listen to it going to work, on their way to work, coming home from work, or maybe you're just hanging out at home and you want to talk some Duck football. But wherever you're at, I appreciate you guys listening to the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks over on Fan Nation, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. We got a big episode in store for you guys today. We're coming to you live on YouTube. YouTube.com/Oregon Football Max Torres is where you can find us, as well as on Twitter. Lock in with me on Twitter at mtorresports. If you guys are here on YouTube, hop in that live chat and let me know what your thoughts are on the big commitment of the day. That is Jordan Burch, as well as your thoughts on Oregon football recruiting, because there's a whole lot of storylines that we got to get into. We're going to start off talking about Jordan Burch. He is the man of the hour with regard to Oregon football recruiting. Then we'll talk a little bit of Evan Williams, who comes over from Fresno State, following in his brother Bennett's footsteps. And then we also have Casey Rogers returning to Oregon in 2023. Like I said, big day of news for Oregon football. So want to know what your guys' thoughts are. Leave me a comment, leave me a question, and I'll do my best to address it. So starting off the episode, we're going to be talking about Jordan Burch. Former South Carolina edge rusher Jordan Burch has committed to the Oregon Ducks, an absolutely massive addition for Dan Lanning and his coaching staff out of the transfer portal here in the 2023 cycle. Burch entered the transfer portal, I want to say, earlier this month. So definitely a newer name in the transfer portal. But obviously this recruitment moved very quickly for Burch, who had no shortage of interest. He came out to Eugene for an official visit over the weekend, and the Ducks were able to wrap this one up. Just to talk a little bit about Jordan Burch and the kind of player that he is, 6'6", 275 pounds, comes over from South Carolina after playing 3 seasons in Columbia. And that means that he has 2 more seasons of additional eligibility should he choose to use it. Once he gets going at Oregon, the extra year comes from the COVID season, as we all know. But I'm thinking, I said it after he committed earlier on today, I'm thinking that he's probably going to be a guy that is one and done if everything goes according to plan for him at the University of Oregon. Stats at South Carolina from the 2022 year: 60 total tackles, 32 of those were solo, 3.5 sacks, and 1 fumble recovery to go along with 3 passes defended. So you love to have a lineman, a linebacker who's going to be active at the point of attack at the line of scrimmage and able to bat down some of those passes from the opposing quarterback. But I love this addition for the Ducks, and I really think it's not that complicated, right? The reason you like this addition, if you're an Oregon fan, is because Oregon desperately needed a pass rusher and just more guys to assist in the pass rush in 2023. DJ Johnson heads to the NFL draft in 2023. Definitely one of the better players on Oregon's defense from a season ago. But let's be honest, even when DJ Johnson was at Oregon, Oregon's pass rush was not that great. Even when Kayvon Thibodeau was at Oregon, Oregon's pass rush wasn't that great. And I think a big part of that is because you haven't had the depth along the defensive line that Oregon is poised to have now with some of the big additions that they've made through the high school ranks and then obviously through the portal with Jordan Burch. We'll get more into that kind of big picture idea when we talk about Casey Rogers a little bit later in this show. But I think the big thing with Jordan Burch, as I look through some of my notes here, Oregon wanted to be selective in the portal when it came to getting an edge rusher. We all knew, like I said, that Oregon needed to add an edge rusher with DJ Johnson going to the NFL draft, exhausting his eligibility at the college level. But Oregon signed a ton of guys at the defensive line position, at the edge rusher position, right? You have Mateo Uyunglele, who's already enrolled in at Oregon. You have Jaden Moore. You have Blake Purchase. And Blake Purchase is one of those guys that Oregon is super happy they were able to hang on to, because you had to hold off a late push from Deion Sanders, Coach Prime at Colorado. That was one of his first priorities once he got to Colorado was, okay, what top talent can I keep in state? And that's the exact reason that Blake Purchase's signed letter of intent took a little bit longer than some of those other guys during the early signing period. So you get a win by holding off Coach Prime and hanging on to one of your most prized edge rushers in the class of 2023. Based on some of the people that I've talked to around the program at Oregon, Blake Purchase is the kind of guy that I think they believe could have an early impact. We already talked about Mateo Uyunglele. Man, what a huge win that was during the early signing period. You had Jaden Moore, you had Tatum Tuioti, who I mentioned. But all that to say, Oregon knew that they wanted to be selective in the transfer portal when they were going for an edge rusher, for another pass rusher. They weren't going to take just anybody. And let me tell you, Jordan Burch is not just anybody. Arguably the top remaining talent in the entire transfer portal. Certainly in terms of the guys that Oregon was going for, you had a lot of big names with previous ties to Oregon enter the transfer portal, right? Anthony Lucas being one of those big names. A former Oregon target in the class of 2022 out of the state of Arizona, spent 1 year at Texas A&M, and then today announcing his commitment to USC. So the Lincoln Riley and the Trojans get a big addition up front, staying in the Pac-12. But with Jordan Burch, that connection with Dan Lanning was obviously a huge factor here, right? The Lanning factor. Lanning really flexing his muscles on the recruiting trail as a closer. I think when Jordan Burch entered the transfer portal, the reason that there was so much smoke around the tie between him and the University of Oregon was because of Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning was his lead recruiter at Georgia when he was getting recruited out of Hammond High School in South Carolina in the class of 2020. So obviously you want to keep those relationships strong and you want to be able to return to those relationships. And it's just an example, I think, another example of why you want to keep those relationships going and how recruiting has changed in the era of the transfer portal. Because not only do you have to recruit guys to get them to your school, get them to your program, but once they get there, you got to keep recruiting them to keep them happy. And then obviously all these other programs across the country, you kind of want to keep those relationships going to a certain degree for an opportunity like this, when an instance like this arises. So Dan Lanning's definitely a huge part here. And then, Tosh Lapoy, you got to give him a whole lot of credit too. I know he's really excited to work with Jordan Burch once he gets to Eugene. I wrote a little bit about it after I logged my prediction. I logged my prediction to Jordan Burch yesterday. So excited to see that come to fruition. But sources are telling me that it looks like Jordan Burch will likely enroll at Oregon this week. By the end of the week, and talk about a hot run in the transfer portal. Oregon added former Arizona State linebacker Connor Soley after a visit this weekend. Also added Evan Williams, safety, after this weekend. So they're really just doing an awesome job here in the transfer portal. I believe Burch is the 9th player from the transfer portal to commit to Oregon through this cycle, and they're doing an awesome job addressing needs on this roster, taking a look at those guys who run out of eligibility, taking a look at those guys who transfer, who go to the NFL draft. Christian Gonzalez is obviously one of those, and how do you adapt and how do you kind of cater your recruiting approach to best address those needs with guys that fit your scheme, fit your culture, and the kind of person that you're looking for. So I think Jordan Burch, with his size, he's just different. I think he's the kind of guy that you really haven't seen too much of at Oregon, right? Jordan Burch's commitment to Oregon, I think, is part of the reason that Oregon recruits and Oregon players are saying Dan Lanning is bringing the SEC to the Pac-12, bringing the SEC out west, because you don't see these kind of guys getting recruited to Oregon from the West Coast on a regular basis, right? Sure, you have your Amari Washingtons from Chandler, Arizona, right? He's a huge piece of this 2023 recruiting class along defensive line. 6'4", 305 pounds, super twitchy. I was able to talk to his coach when I was out in San Antonio, and he was telling me he was shocked that Amari Washington wasn't playing in this game, saying that there's just not that many guys out west that are built like he is. Paraphrasing a little bit, and that have had the production that Amari Washington has had. And then you also have some of those big bodies in Utah, right? Look at Sam Taimani, who's out of Salt Lake City. Look at Ben Roberts, who's also out of Salt Lake City. You do have those guys, every now and then, every cycle or two. But if you want a trench monster, if you want a huge dude that is just different, you have to go to the Southeast. You got to go to SEC country. And that's something that Oregon's tried to do quite a bit, obviously, recruiting the prep rankings, the prep ranks. But this is a good opportunity for Oregon to stay active out there, and then obviously leverage some of those connections that you have on this coaching staff, right? And I think another point with Jordan Burch's commitment that I think might make some Duck fans happy. Oregon missed out on David Hicks down the stretch late in 2023. There were a lot of people that, there was someone that I talked to, I should say not a lot of people, but there was someone I talked to close to the program that was, like, hey, David Hicks, really, really liked Oregon. And then there was another, I want to say Steve Wiltfong wrote it. Someone at 24/7 wrote it. I'm blanking on their name. I think that the line was, if Oregon was in Texas, then David Hicks would be a Duck. Well, you missed out on David Hicks, but now you get Jordan Burch, a former 5-star prospect in the 2020 class. Former 5-star, looking at the 247 Sports composite ranking from the 2020 class, rated a .9954, number 8 in the country overall, number 2 defensive tackle. This is just a class that was loaded, right? This 2020 class, if you're looking at other talent in the trenches, you had Brian Brzee as the number 1 overall prospect, who ended up going to Clemson. You had Justin Flo in this class. You had Miles Murphy in this class. And then right behind Miles Murphy at number 8, there's Jordan Burch, your latest Oregon Duck. So I think that this is, I don't want to say a consolation prize, but after you miss out on David Hicks, to get a player of Burch's caliber, someone who looks like a plug-and-play guy, should be able to go right in and contribute at Oregon, is just absolutely huge. And I think that, Jordan Burch obviously isn't the same kind of player that Kayvon Thibodeau is, right? Kayvon was 6'5", 250. Now you have Jordan Burch, who's 6'6", 275. So obviously they're going to move a little bit different, but the structure of Oregon's defense is, pretty fluid. I think that you have a little bit of, you have some options with Jordan Burch in terms of where you want to put him. But I think that adding him allows you to kick a guy like Brandon Dorlus more inside, where I think you could argue that he's been more impactful. And now that you have Casey Rogers coming back, that gives you even more flexibility along that defensive line. I think that the biggest takeaway with Jordan Burch's commitment is that we haven't seen Oregon have this much depth along the defensive line and this many different kind of players in a long time. And even though Oregon's defense has really had some good defensive talent, I don't think they've been at the level that they needed to. I was recording with Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On Ducks earlier today. You guys can watch his show, which comes out tomorrow. I was talking to him and I was saying, I'm not trying to criticize Oregon's defensive line, because Oregon's defensive line has had some awesome players over the years, but they haven't been where they needed to be. And you need to be a defensive line that is just full of dudes. That's what Georgia's doing. That's what Alabama's doing. That's what Ohio State's doing. And now Oregon, with this commitment, they're saying, hey, let us join the party. We also just haven't seen Oregon land this caliber of defensive linemen, at least not on a consistent basis, right? You obviously have Kayvon Thibodeau. You had Canton Kamatule. I want to say was his name. I need to look at it now because I probably just butchered that. Okay, Canton Kamatule, who ended up transferring to UCF, but he was a 5-star that committed to Oregon out of the state of Hawaii. Never really was able to put it together. Now you're getting Mateo Uyunglele, you're getting Jordan Burch, you're getting Ashton Porter, who was an Under Armour All-American. You beat out Michigan State for him. You get Johnny Bowens, who was kind of a late flip, if you want to call it a flip, from Texas A&M. You get Terrence Green, a huge body from the state of Texas. You know, we've talked extensively about the importance of the state of Texas and Oregon recruiting. So, you know, can't really say enough about Jordan Burch and just how big of an addition this is for the Oregon Ducks in the transfer portal. This is their biggest addition of the offseason, I would say, and it's really not that close. And if you follow Oregon football and have seen what the defense is like, you know how the pass rush has been lacking. They haven't been able to get off the field on third down. They've struggled in pass coverage, and that's not all on the secondary. They need some help from the front seven and from that pass rush. And Burch is a guy that's going to help generate a pass rush in a big way for Oregon. So I think another thing that really need to talk about with this Oregon defensive line is that you can't just focus on Burch, because then you got to remember, hey, there's Brandon Dorless. Hey, there's Mateo Uyunglele coming off the edge. There's Blake Purchase. The kind of caliber of guys that they're bringing in here are difference makers. So many guys are already on campus. We didn't even talk about Michael Gardner, Tavita Pomee. This is probably the best haul of defensive linemen in a single class that I think Oregon has seen in years. You know, dating back to, I see a comment here about Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner, you know, 2 all-time great Ducks defensive linemen. Just how much I feel like it's probably not a stretch to say that the defensive line could be the group that is poised to make the biggest jump from 2022 to 2023, given those additions, given the guys that are coming back, like Casey Rogers, like Popo Amavai, Keon Ware-Hudson, another guy coming back, Brandon Dorless. So huge commitment for the Ducks, and super stoked about Jordan Burch coming to Oregon. Don't go anywhere. We got more Oregon football recruiting coverage for you after this. Welcome back to the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, coming to you live on YouTube as well as Twitter. Let me look over here to see if this is going on Twitter. I believe it should be. We are up and running on Twitter. Love to see that. But we got to talk about another big commitment for the Oregon Ducks, and that is former Fresno State safety Evan Williams. Familiar name for the Ducks, as he is the younger brother of Bennett Williams. Comes to Oregon after spending 4 years at Fresno State, but he only played in 4 games in 2020. I'm not exactly sure. I don't remember how the Mountain West managed their COVID season, but I think that should mean if he only played in 4 games in 2020, that he has 2 more years of eligibility of 19, 20, 21, 22. So he's played 4 years. We have the COVID year, so we know he has at least 1 more year of eligibility. But Evan Williams is a big addition. I can't even tell you guys how many times I've been writing Evan Williams' name, in the past 24 hours. And I started writing Bennett just because I'm so used to writing about Bennett. I just thought that was kind of funny. But Bennett Williams, you're adding some proven production, right? You're adding a guy who was an All Mountain West defensive back in 2021, started all 13 games at safety for Fresno State, led the team in tackles with 93 tackles, 60 of which were solo in his junior season. And then he helped lead Fresno State to a conference title in 2022, their first conference title since 2018. So this is a special kind of guy. And just looking at his 2022 stats, kind of what have you done for me lately, kind of a deal. Let's look at kind of what he's been able to accomplish on the gridiron for the Bulldogs in 2022. Their stats are taking a second to load here, so I'm going to go ahead and just look at my story and cheat a little bit here. Okay. Let's see. Okay, in 2022, sorry. Okay, let me just slow myself down. Let's look at these stats. Do I even have them? I don't even know if I have them in my story. Let's see if this loaded. Sorry about that for the delay. Okay, in 2022, Evan Williams accounted for 66 total tackles, 54 of which were solo. He had, let's see, 2 quarterback hurries, 4 pass breakups, and he also had 6 tackles for loss. So he is someone who has a knack for getting into the backfield, which I think is awesome, especially for a defensive back. You want a guy who can make plays, rushing the passer, stopping the run as well. I think that there's definitely some playmaking ability there as well. I was actually able to talk to one of a coach that is really close with Evan Williams from the College of San Mateo. He coached Evan Williams and he coached Bennett Williams. Just asked him for some thoughts on Bennett as a player, as a guy. And this is the quote I got. He said, quote, "Evan is a great overall kid on and off the field. His football skills are some of the best I've seen in terms of football knowledge, technique, his ability to play a ball, and his physical presence in the run game and in the pass." So it's a good overall safety pickup for Oregon, without a doubt. You lose. Let's just look at what the safety picture is kind of looking like for Oregon in 2023, right? You lose Bennett Williams, who exhausts his college eligibility and is going to hopefully end up on a roster in the NFL. But you're still waiting to see a couple guys and see what their decisions are. You're waiting to see what Jamal Hill is going to do. You're waiting to see what Steve Stevens is going to do, as well as Brian Addison. So I think this is a good addition for Oregon because it gives you a guy who's another plug-and-play guy, kind of like Jordan Burch, but that safety room is pretty crowded because everybody I just mentioned played a lot of snaps last year. So Oregon's secondary, aside from cornerback, I think that it was kind of a rotating door a little bit, especially at safety. But with Evan Williams, the Ducks are leveraging family connections again. They're probably one of the best in the country when it comes to getting guys from family members that have played at Oregon or whatever that connection is. You want to look to leverage it without a doubt. So I think that Evan Williams is another solid addition. It's an addition that you needed. You needed to add some more depth in the secondary. Obviously, you needed to add a corner with Christian Gonzalez going to the NFL, and that's why they went out and got Kyrie Jackson from Alabama. So I really like what Oregon's doing as far as filling those needs in. And Evan Williams is an exciting player. He's also got that frame physically that I think you want in a defensive back, listed on the Fresno State roster at 6'1", 194 pounds. So I think that gives you confidence he'll be able to match up with wide receivers and even tight ends that he's going to have to cover once he gets to the Pac-12. And I was talking to somebody at Oregon earlier today, and they were saying that when they were playing Fresno State in 2021, they were kind of saying, "Hey, who's that guy? Who's that guy playing safety?" So it's nice that they're obviously not going to have to worry about going against Evan Williams now that he's on the roster and can play for them. So I think Evan Williams is an addition that could kind of fly under the radar a little bit for Oregon. But he's a player that I'm super, super excited for. And what better way to address the loss of Bennett Williams than by adding his brother? So I'm going to take a second to check out the comments here and see what you guys have to say. Raymond asks, who will be the starters at edge in 2023 for the Ducks? Jordan Burch? Will either Mace Funa or Brandon Dorlus even be starters in 2023? Yeah, I think that the starters for Oregon, looking at that defensive front, you're obviously going to have Jordan Burch as a guy who plays a big part of that defense. I think Mace Funa is another really solid piece that you could probably start you could probably start Funa and Burch opposite of each other. And then you also have probably some mixture of Brandon Dorlus and Casey Rogers and Popo Amavai along that line. But that rotation is looking really solid because you also have Taki Taimani, you also have Trevin Mae, you also have Keon Ware Hudson. So I feel like the starters at edge is probably going to be Jordan Burch and Mace Funa for now is kind of what I'm thinking. But we have to see, obviously there's so much time between now and the 2023 season. We got to see what things are looking like once we get to the spring game and kind of how they're going to be used, because Jordan Burch is more of that traditional defensive end that can play a couple different things, can play the 5 tech, might be able to play the 3 tech. We'll have to see. But he's a big body that can set the edge in the run. He's got a lot of speed for his size, and he's uber athletic. So I think that Mace Funa and Dorlus will probably still be starters. I probably say I'm more confident in Dorlus being a starter, but Mace coming back for another year, you would think that he's pretty confident he is going to be a starter. So Oregon's defensive front is looking absolutely loaded. Let's see. Tad Fernandez says, "Hey Max, thanks for the pod. I'm not sure if I missed it, but how many more years of eligibility does Burch have? I didn't see the red shirt. I didn't see he redshirted, so I assume 1." Yeah, so Jordan Burch started college football in 2020. So you figure that's 2020, 2021, and 2022. And you don't count one of those years because of COVID. So I believe that means he has 2 years of eligibility left, but probably only going to be 1 year at Oregon is my guess if I had to give you an estimated guess right now. But I think to answer that question, I would say 2 years of eligibility. All right. Andrew says, so 10 incoming defensive linemen, and the only outgoing one is DJ Johnson. The numbers game looks a little concerning. This isn't the NFL where you can cut guys. Yeah, I think that, we all know that Oregon's over the limit right now. But the nice thing is that you don't need to get under that limit until the players actually enroll at your school. So I think they do have a little bit of added flexibility, right? This isn't the position overlap, but you saw Cam McCormick enter the transfer portal, so that frees up a roster spot. And I think that you just gotta. It's obviously very fluid as the situations develop, and as Oregon adds guys from the 23 class and the transfer portal, excuse me, because a lot of that 2023 class is already enrolled. I saw a picture the other day that Oregon football posted on their Twitter just about some of the guys that have already enrolled early. You have Dante Dowdell, who's already out there, Michael Gardner, who I mentioned, Tavita Pomee. I talked to Cole Martin when he was out in San Antonio and just wrote a story, kind of a Q&A style one again of my conversation with Cole Martin. So go head on over to Ducks Digest if you haven't already given that a read. But Cole Martin's there. Austin Novosad is there. Junior Angelau is already there. The Texas offensive line transfer, Ajani Cornelius, is already at Oregon. Ashton Kozar is already at Oregon. So there's so many pieces that are already there. But I know that Oregon is well aware of the numbers, and they are going to continue to manage that. Trello one says, I really hope Mateo can push for a starting spot. Yeah, I mean, Mateo is, a special talent, about as special a talent as you can find in the front seven. Definitely a huge piece of Oregon's 2023 recruiting class. I mean, that was a guy. I was around Bosco all season, and I never really felt like Oregon, got a solid lead for Mateo. But at the 11th hour, They were able to pull that one out. And you got to give the credit to Tosh Lapoy. He is just one of the absolute best in the business. And I wrote about it, following signing day. Tosh Lapoy is the kind of guy you bring to Oregon, as well as Dan Lanning, to land a talent like Mateo. And he's a guy that could definitely benefit from enrolling early, just to kind of get his body right a little bit. I'm not saying his body wasn't right, but just to get his body, ready for the college level. 6'5", 265. You got to wonder where they want to use him on that defensive line, because he's a versatile guy, huge body that played all over the place at St. John Bosco. So I don't know if Mateo is going to start, but I would be very confident that he's probably going to be in that two deep, as well as Blake Purchase. All right, let's see. Let's see what else we got here. Andrew also asks, is there still room available for Harbor, Pleasant, maybe D Rob? Assuming he's talking about Deuce Robinson. Yeah, I know that Oregon's still working for all of those guys. I think you definitely feel more confident about Nicholas Harbor and Roderick Pleasant than you do Deuce Robinson at this point. I know that with Deuce Robinson, he just has such a busy schedule, especially with baseball. He might be a Polynesian Bowl guy too, I believe. So that's another weekend trip that takes out the opportunity to get him to Oregon. But I think he said he didn't rule out an Oregon visit when he was at the Under Armour All-American Bowl in Orlando, a week or so ago. So it's a guy that Oregon's probably going to, continue to recruit. But right now, I feel like the momentum is probably in Georgia's favor, Georgia or Texas. And then you also have USC looking in as well. With Deuce Robinson, that's a guy who also is going to be valuing, the prestige of the baseball program, because he has gone on record saying he wants to play both professionally. But as far as Roderick Pleasant, I think Oregon's in an awesome spot with him. He announced a top 5 yesterday that consisted of UCLA, USC, Oregon, Boston College, and I want to say Cal as well. I believe that the Cal Bears are still in it. Yep, that's right. So top 5: Boston College, UCLA, Oregon, Cal, and USC. The interesting thing with Roderick Pleasant is that he took a visit to UCLA, and I think part of the reason they took a visit to UCLA was because the Bruins landed Dante Moore. And I've talked to you guys before about how Oregon and their recruitment of Pleasant, they're kind of pitching the opportunity to play a little bit of offense, play a little bit of special teams, because he's just a different type of athlete, different type of speed and explosiveness. I think that maybe he could see himself playing with Dante Moore, playing some offense under Chip Kelly. I think that's probably part of the reason that UCLA was kind of able to sneak into that recruitment a little bit later. But Roderick Pleasant has one more official visit on deck, and I believe that official visit is set for this weekend to the USC Trojans. So right in his backyard, he's not too far away over at Junipero Serra in Gardena. So that's a big official visit we're going to have to track this weekend. But for a guy speaking about track, if you want to be a track guy, there's no better place to go than Oregon. And I think that's really the case with Pleasant and Nicholas Harbor. I think, we know how important the track pitch is for both of those guys. I think that, you talk about a different type of athlete, Nicholas Harbor at 6'5", 225, still having track speed. Being a part of the Nike family at Oregon, there's just so many factors that I think help Oregon, even though we talked about UCLA getting involved late with Roderick Pleasant. Oregon hasn't exactly been surging for Nicholas Harbor through much of his recruitment. I believe he's visited before, I want to say, but he's going to be taking an official visit to Oregon on January 27th, and I believe that is going to be the last visit he takes before his announcement. I believe both Roderick Pleasant and Nicholas Harbor are set for signing day decisions at the beginning of February. Nicholas Harbor's, generated a lot of buzz as an edge rusher but he wants to play offense at the next level. So whether that be tight end, wide receiver, Oregon just missed out on Jamari Johnson from Inglewood, who stayed true to his commitment to Louisville. So maybe with him going to Louisville, they feel good about Nicholas Harbor. I think based on the conversations that I've had, I think Oregon feels good about Roderick Pleasant and Nicholas Harbor. But there's 3 weeks between now and February 1st. So plenty of time for more things to happen on the recruiting trail. But I'd say right now I feel more confident about Roderick Pleasant and Nicholas Harbor than Deuce Robinson. All right, one more person we have to talk about on this episode. We have to talk about Casey Rogers announcing his return to Oregon in 2023. 6'5", 285 pounds, I want to say. Casey Rogers, a huge body for Tony Tuioti in that Oregon defensive line. And I think that he was definitely one of those more underappreciated pieces along the defensive line for Oregon in 2023. When he committed to Oregon, I wasn't really too aware of who he was. I think that it was good to have that familiarity with Tuioti. Him and Jordan Riley both coming over to Oregon from Lincoln definitely helped bolster Oregon's defensive line. But, I don't want to steal too much from the show that I did with Spencer, but because that's going to come out tomorrow. But he did a really good job. He was saying that he kind of described Casey Rogers. If you're looking at this from an offensive standpoint, having to go against Casey Rogers, he's just kind of annoying. He's always there. He's kind of got his hand in a lot of plays, and is just kind of a pesky guy. He batted down some balls, I want to say, in the Holiday Bowl. Didn't really excel as a pass rusher, I want to say, but I think he did do a good job generating pressure from the interior of the defensive line. Definitely helped Oregon's run defense become one of the best in the conference, and I want to say at one point one of the best in the country. We know that wasn't the case for the pass defense, but at least that defensive line could stop the run for the most part. So I think that just with Casey Rogers coming back to Oregon, you get some consistency along that defensive line. And you look at that group and how experienced they are. You have Casey Rogers, Brandon Dorless, Popo Amavai, Keon Ware-Hudson coming back. You have Keanu Williams. You have Taki Taimani. And then you add in all these guys from the 2023 class. You add in Mateo. You add in Jordan Burch. You add in Terrence Green, Jaden Moore, Blake Purchase. There's just so much talent along that front line that I think Oregon is really poised to have a big year, and then not even just have a big year, be set up for success down the road. You have all these savvy vets that are going to be there, and they're going to help bring these young guys along. And so many of the defensive line recruits are already enrolled early at Oregon, which is definitely something that, you can't overstate the importance of getting these guys involved early, getting them used to the college way of life, getting them into the weight room. Talked about getting their bodies right, getting them adjusted to the college level all months before spring football starts. We still don't have a start date on spring football. I know there's probably some Oregon fans that are focused on basketball, but hey, I'm all focused on football and recruiting. That's what I enjoy covering the most. And I know you guys, can't get enough Oregon football and recruiting content. So that is part of the reason that I do what I do. But Casey Rogers is another big piece of Oregon's defensive line, Oregon's defense coming back in 2023. I think that he just continued to get better throughout the year. And I think I tweeted something that got a good amount of traction at one point in the season, just saying, man, what a season he's had, what an addition he's been. So I just feel like I'm a huge fan of Casey Rogers. Can't get enough of Casey Rogers. That defensive line is going to be scary. I think that, it goes without saying, getting all of these names, getting all this talent in the fold is one thing. And then getting those guys to work in unison and, sync up and become a really good product on the field, that's a whole nother thing. If all it took was recruiting elite names, then I think you could see a lot more teams have really good defensive lines. But this coaching staff with Dan Lanning, with Tosh Lupoi, with Tony Tuioti, they're definitely set for success and to really take a big step in 2022. I think that it's probably safe to assume that they're going to be good defending the run again, but where they can really make that leap, take that next step, generating some consistent pass rush. And aren't they going to need it? They are going to need to generate a serious amount of pass rush this year because Pac-12's quarterbacks are the real deal. You got Michael Penix at Washington, Caleb Williams at USC, Cam Rising's coming back to Utah. Probably going to have Dante Moore at UCLA. I saw him in San Antonio, and he was an absolute phenom. You also have DJ Uiagalelei, Mateo's older brother, at Oregon State. So there's no shortage of really good quarterbacks in this conference, and only the best teams that are able to get after the quarterback are going to be able to slow them down. So we know how important that is. But that's going to do it for us here on this episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Greatly appreciate you guys tuned in on YouTube. If you guys are still here, do me a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It only takes a second out of your day, and it is a tremendous way to support what I'm doing covering the Oregon Ducks. And then do me a favor and share the Ducks Dish podcast. Share it with your friends, your family, and other Duck fans. Make sure you lock in with me on Twitter. At mtorres sports is where you can find me, and find all my written content over on ducksdigest.com. Appreciate you guys for tuning in and taking some time out of your day to talk some Duck football with me. Until next time, you've been listening to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.